Hello and welcome everyone back to Esports Weekly for the week of October 1st. It's a brand new month and a brand new week. We had a bye week for the PPL last week, so that's why we didn't have any episodes going on last week. But this week we have full content. My name is Gormizer, and joining me once again on the desk is Rain Day and Pretty Hair. How are you guys feeling about this week?
Very good.
Octoberific.
Optimistic.
Well, does everything feel maybe a little bit more Halloween-y, I guess? Because I feel like that's like the big step from September 30th.
I was hoping you were going to wear your orange shirt, the Great Pumpkin shirt.
I forgot.
I know. That would have been a perfect kind of segue into
I was actually, like yesterday I was thinking about it, and I was like, what shirt do I want to wear tomorrow? This one I just haven't worn in like 2 weeks.
You're
so
like a two months ahead. That's like a Christmas shirt right there. You just got to flip December and October.
I need to buy a green tie and green jacket, and then I'll be on point.
You'll be a walking mistletoe. And,
a walking mistletoe.
Yeah, walking
That'll get
magnet.
dangerous.
People keep making out around me. I don't know why. So annoying.
Brad and Nick were over in the back just like, I don't know what that was about.
But we did have console last week, as well as the PGS last week. But for console, we'll be able to look at what happened last week, as well as just go over the fact that we will be watching it again in about an hour from now, starting around 11. But you can see some of the things that have come through. Zimmerframe, now Team Viral, probably a team to keep your eyes on, as well as Brutal Fissure. I would say are probably my two underdogs overall for the regions that have been doing really well.
Yeah, for sure. You have just a couple of weeks left of console, I believe, this week, and then next Monday we'll conclude our console. And you're starting to see a couple little upsets. Onslaught losing in that last week as well. It was really, really crazy to see.
It's definitely been a big shakeup overall, because a lot of these teams, I mean, even Elevate has lost a set now. So we're seeing teams that admittedly have always been to LAN have kind of had that guaranteed pass, no longer quite guaranteed to be able to make it. But again, that's going to be going on in about an hour. We'll have the pre-show, all 8 sets, as well as the post-show, so make sure you tune in for that. But as it is right now, we also had the PPL Week 3, not last week, but 2 weeks ago. We didn't really get to do a huge recap for it. I think I did a recap video, but recap videos are so bland, there's no real reason to go over it.
I agree. I'm sure we have the schedule to show everybody, but I mean, the PPL was a great kind of opportunity to see whether these teams could match up against the big dogs. I think Virtus Pro Na'Vi was what we were looking at, and Na'Vi just proved to be vital. We had that incredible game with Renegades and Splice that we talked about a lot of different directions it could have gone, but overall it was just Team MV who were solid and not as Sincere who were solid, and Ninjas and Pajamic and Fnatic tied up.
Right. So the biggest, thing, that 3-0 upset against Fnatic was insane to see, and that keeps Europe tight. Those top 2 teams in Europe. Now it's a really big conversation going into these last couple of weeks, where before, and sort of how if you look in North America, it's not really. You've got 2 teams that are now starting to pull away from the pack. Yeah. But with Europe, it's going to be a really, really fun thing to watch down the stretch.
So when we were looking at all the games that had happened during Week 3, the one that stood out the most, and maybe just the one we remembered the most because it was the last 2 hours of the PPL for that week, was the Splice and Renegades game.
That's right.
And it was a mix of some players who we don't typically expect being able to be the ones that step up, or I guess at this point we expect all of them to step up. So Shadow having a pretty good set of games on Cassie, whereas Ricotta didn't quite seem to be there that entire time for Splice.
There was like moments I remember just being frustrated watching Ricotta, and there was moments where it just didn't kind of seem like himself. Normally a player, and that reputation that he's gotten, it has come from always, in my opinion, being confident in those situations. Like, even though he was brand new on the scene or a rookie, right, it didn't really matter that he was squaring off against some of the best in the business. But there was moments, especially on Ascension Peak, that's the one I'm really starting to remember and come back to me, when he was on Leon, Moonchopper was on Victor, he kind of had him low, he had his ultimate as well, and he didn't just gas pedal dive in there and kill him with the ultimate. That was like that moment where I was like, what is he doing today? He just doesn't kind of look like himself.
Yeah, I mean, the caveat of all this is the best Paladins, in the world as far as these 5 teams. Now, different levels within these teams, but you put any of these guys against anybody else in the world, and they're going to dominate. That being said, Nick and I had very different takes about this game. He was casting, I was watching, and part of it was that it did look like maybe Splice, Ricotta, Shadow, from when I had given them the praise of saying, I'm looking at Random Noob and Rock Monkey, and I'm looking at G2 Esports without bodies and only Evil Eye. I'm looking at Shadow and Ricotta as the top 2 damage dealers potentially to compete with those guys. And then they put a performance like this, which was relatively shaky. I'll use that word. They didn't perform. They weren't stable in all situations. And I was rather disappointed because I saw that growth they had and I wanted them to continue it. very much, like you see a young pup start to take his first steps and then all of a sudden falls back down on his stomach again. Overall, though, I mean, you can't say that mechanically they can't perform in moments and they weren't special. And I think that's what stood out to us. Still special moments, but they couldn't put it together long enough, so to speak, to actually construct a road to victory.
Yeah. We've been looking at damage more as a duo, and I think that's kind of been appropriate with the way things have changed.
I think that's appropriate.
If you had one player, like you have a really good Rock Monkey, it doesn't really matter what the rest of the team is doing as long as they're just par. If you have a stellar game, you can pretty much carry it. But with the way things have shifted, specifically, like you said, everyone getting so much better, you have to look at the duos. And that's also where on the other side, not only was it Shadow and Ricotta, but Loki and Moonchopper kind of having the same push and pull. It didn't feel as though they were working as much as a unit as much as it was, okay, now Loki, you get a couple kills. Now Moonchopper, you get a couple kills. It felt very tug of war.
I never felt it from those two. If it was a push coming from the Renegades, it felt like it was coming from the front line.
I never felt it from, I'm going to be honest, and I love Moonchopper. I've said a lot of great things about Loki. I haven't felt it from them all season. I have rarely been called to say their names at all when they're on screen, and that is a problem. You have to start making these plays that make people notice you. You know what it's like when you go out in public and you want to attract some attention. Maybe you're looking for a girlfriend, you're doing something. You have to make people say, who is that guy? And that's the same thing in Paladins and competitive sports. You have to get the triples, the quadras, make somebody say, whoa, okay, now I'm interested. You have my attention, sir. And I think there's just been too little of it, too late for Moonchopper and Loki. Can they redeem themselves? Are they still great players? Sure. I mean, some of my favorites to watch and hang out with, but I think that with them, they've got to find their balance and they've got to find their chi, their yin and yang. How do they complement each other? Because, it used to be Andro and Drogos. Those aren't always available, and so they have to find those second answers.
That was a huge part of the set, too, was like the blaster bans were so... I think Willow made it through like a couple of times, and Drogos was non-existent in this set. We had two big Drogos players that just did not get to come out of the cave.
There was a lot that I think going on, but for this set, it was kind of easily tied into a nice bow where it's just, if either team at that point have a stellar performance that becomes a 3-0, it's because both of them had those moments where it's just like, man, this does not feel like even the team we saw in week 2 that I think kept it as close. But as of right now, a lot of the things that teams are looking for, especially going into week 4, last week of the PGS, going to be the last 2 weeks of console, is their path to LAN, being able to get towards that HRX goal to try and become the world champion. Do you think, I'm just going to start with these two teams, either of these two have a chance at making a big run to get to that world championship spot?
Top 2, no.
Yeah, that would be a rough one, man.
Not North America. They're too far pulled away. Bodies is coming back as well, unless that causes some kind of implosion on G2.
I don't know.
I don't see it.
I mean, I think that they have opportunities to grow. And that's what I want to see from them. If they get a game at LAN, if they get a set over a team that we thought maybe they wouldn't beat, maybe they somehow work it around and they take one off of G2, even though it's not a full set, it's just they show up. Actually, any team besides G2, because they somehow have something with G2, the same way G2 has something with SK. But I'd like to see that growth from them. If not, I don't see that going much farther than that, William. And I think that overall, they've still got a lot of growing to do in this season. But anything can happen at LAN. That's the cool part about it. That's why you got to watch.
Is there anything over the next couple weeks in North America or Europe that are really going to catch your eyes when it comes down to looking at placement rounds or going into HRX, like teams that are either a dark horse or just look like they're going to dominate everything?
I think in Europe, you have to watch every single one of NIP's game and every single one of Fnatic's games from here on out. They've already played each other twice, so that's all settled. You have to watch every other game that is supposed to be these must-wins, and whether or not this comes down to just a straight-up record tiebreak, which I don't know has ever happened. I think it's only ever happened through like head-to-heads.
And if you look at the actual LAN experience from the teams all the way from 1 to 4 in Europe, it's pretty even. I mean, you take a look at Bird and Perdo and Sheepa, and you look at Elven Path, and you look at all these guys and Bugsy. I mean, they carry the weight on their own teams to have, like, when you really, like, measure the years, and Crunchy, he takes some years off, and then, Bird had some years on and things like that. You're just like, well, everyone kind of has the same amount of LAN experience. Can that make a difference? I don't know, but I think 1 through 4 could make a run. I would not be surprised if we saw 1 through 4 in the finals or getting close to being able to qualify for sure for HRX and make it to the big stage.
That actually is a perfect segue to talk about Mouse Sports, which is number 5 overall. Yeah. They're not 1 through 4. And I'm kind of curious in just your general thoughts. Are they improving? Have things been getting better for them? Or are they just the same team that they've been pretty much the entire time?
It's hard to tell with everyone else in Europe improving as much as they have. It's hard to measure them when they're still the bottom, right? Maybe they did improve, right? But if they're still the bottom, they're still the bottom.
Listen, the Lakers have been the worst for 5 years. You have to go through those moments sometimes, and I think that's okay because you realize what's not working, and sometimes you do need to have an influx of a great player. You have to have an influx of somebody who's going to ignite your team, whether it's new management, whether it's a new coach, whether it's a new captain, whether it's just a big star. And I think Mouse Sports have not had that, and they've been working, and now they just see that, you know, still things need to change, but they're heading in hopefully a direction that is upwards, just everyone maybe speeding a little bit along that highway.
Well, I was actually lucky enough to sit down with NTBs, I think 2 weeks ago now at this point, but I got to sit down with him for an interview, and he got to give me a little bit of insight into Mouse Sports, so let's go ahead and share that with everyone watching. All right, hey guys, we're here with NTBs from Mouse Sports, and I mean, already I'm just going to ask you, how are you feeling so far? The split's been kind of an upward trend for you, although I feel like you haven't quite hit where you're waiting for.
No, not at all. So we have a little bit of issues that we think we've got plans to fix at the moment, and the EU teams are just so strong at the moment. I think we have made massive improvements, but so far it's just not being shown on the score lines, and that's our number one aim for the end of the split, is just to make sure that our score lines start to show where we feel that we are as a team at the moment.
You know, you mentioning the fact that, like, you know, everyone in EU at this point seems to be kind of on the rise. How are you feeling about the other teams? You know, NIP, Virtus Pro, Fnatic, and Na'Vi.
So everyone's just doing fantastic at the moment. Like, it's kind of one of those like scary pools, but then at the same time, you have to remember that you're in the same pool as these guys, and you're ready to compete against them any day. So you just need to make sure that those game days end up being according to plan, and I think that's sometimes where we're faltering. We have these ideas in our minds that we practice throughout the weeks and scrims, and then sometimes on the big days they don't really come to fruition in the sense that we had planned. So I think that's kind of our big step at the moment, is making sure that everyone is ready on those game days, ready to do what we need to do.
So what we've talked about on Esports Weekly during some of the pre-shows for the PPL, we always end up coming and talking about Alex and his performance and how it feels like your drafting on Mouse seems to put a lot of pressure onto him. Do you think that there's anything that you could do that would alleviate some of that, or is Alex performing up to the standard you had thought when you brought him into the league?
I mean, well, Alex is just a fantastic player. It's hard to say whether he's competing better or worse for us than on previous teams, because obviously the dynamic of teams change so drastically depending on who's in them, who's doing the shot calls and so forth. So we're going to make adjustments within the team. We're going to make sure that we have the more vocal players playing with Alex, rather than how we've had it at the moment, where some more of the less vocal players have been with him, and we're hoping that's going to kind of just put the team into a more position of synergy that allows Alex to do the work that we know he can, because he's just a phenomenal player.
With the way things have been going, I know we were actually mentioning, I think week one we were saying Alex is kind of just alleviate some of the pressure, let Andrew Doodle do whatever he needs to do, but I feel like he's actually stepped up, like you said, into kind of that damage role. Do you feel like you're going to continue focusing on like the Tyra, the Kinessa for him, or do you think more staple picks like Cassie, Leon are going to kind of fill that role for him?
I think sometimes the thing with Alex is like to give him a more aggressive character is actually the better play for him. But currently the way the meta is unfolding, that's not very easy to do with some of the champions that we can't play at the moment. For example, like the BK, like it's very difficult for us to give him them characters that allow him to just push in. Like say, for example, we want to take the Khan or something. It's hard to take those characters that can really synergize with the Khan shouts and everything to push in to allow Alex to do the job that he wants to be able to do, and that is more attuned to his play style. So I think as things progress in the league, like we're going to figure out little ways that we can adjust to fix this. And obviously new players into the team, there's always going to be little things that we need to figure out and adjust.
So with the way things have gone, I think each split, a lot of these teams have been making, you know, small changes throughout each split afterwards. You guys, again, like you said, coming in with some new players, feeling confident, but not quite where you want to be. Do you see the rest of the split and potentially afterward going your way?
I mean, it's so hard to say at the moment, because every team is performing to such a high standard that you can't turn around and say that, yeah, we're gonna beat them, because you just don't know currently in EU. It's not as cookie cutter as it was in previous seasons. Everyone is competing to such a good standard now, but it makes it so much more fun to know that you can go into these games and have like the fighting chance. Much better from our perspective.
it's definitely been way more entertaining to watch as well. Being able to say that, you know, it's not the static 5 placement that we've seen all year, and knowing that I think it's still not only holding on, but actually going to be excelling. It's nice to know that you guys are keeping a level head, but I mean, that's going to be it for this interview. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. See you later.
I really just wanted to try and get him on air live saying something mean about another team, saying like that Esports was going to come through and like, you know, we're going to be able to like just win the rest of the PPL or every single set we have. And he's just too nice. And admittedly, looking at the league, kind of right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's not much of that from him, for sure. I mean, he's good friends with, I think, a lot of the guys in that scene, so I think he knows and probably respects a lot of what goes into the greatness that they've achieved.
Next week they have a doubleheader, although I feel like those are probably, or I guess this week, it's starting tomorrow. It's going to be a doubleheader for them, and it's going to be, I guess, interesting to see what they have, because a couple of the champions, like you had mentioned, Bomb King, going to be, I think, available for this week, so it's going to be making some shifts overall for them, but I'm not sure if we're going to see Mousesports really come through and beat Fnatic or NIP.
Man, I mean, I'm going to say absolutely not. Fnatic and NIP have way more to lose than Mousesports here, and they have everything to gain. So I don't see these sets going very long, especially because they can't drop a map. I mean, they're tied, so the maps are going to be a big part. If they lose one game to Mousesports, that could be the difference between qualifying for LAN in second place or not. So I expect 2-3-0s, and if it's not, it is going to be a huge problem for one of those teams potentially.
A couple of games that are going to be a little bit faster is actually the second day that you could see there, Wednesday. It's going to be Renegades going for the doubleheader. Once against G2, though, and admittedly with the way they played, specifically against Splyce, I mean, G2 have gone 5 games with Splyce, but it looked like it was on a higher level than the 5 games we saw from Splyce and Renegades. Do you think this is like one that Renegades can come through and clinch away, especially with bodies coming back, or do you think this is going to be G2 showing them their old selves once again?
I think that's the biggest thing about it is bodies coming back. What happens with that? Does he come back hot? Does he come back cold?
Right.
And then obviously Renegades are going to play a part in that. They have their off days. They have their days where they look really good, and a lot of those days in the past have been against G2.
I think it's a trap, man, because you got to be careful about how you approach this one. G2 obviously looking like they want to compete for Envy, maybe try to take a top spot, finish them off later on, and you know, at least secure that second place. But Renegades have always had something that G2 just can't figure out. And you know, bodies coming back, it's not as easily done as it is said to fit back into a lineup after they've been playing for 3-4 weeks without you. And so, great player, gonna do well, but I'm curious if they're gonna just fall asleep at the wheel for just a second to allow Renegades to get that confidence back and maybe find some answers here in the set.
And I mean, that set, admittedly, whether you win or lose for Renegades is going to be a perfect warm-up, because the next one you have to do is go up against SK, which admittedly, while SK is still sitting at the bottom, they haven't been the team to beat, so to speak. They're still on, again, an upward trend. I feel like they're getting better every single week. We've seen them.
Yeah.
This week, I'm kind of curious as to whether or not Renegades are going to have trouble with them, or is this going to be, is this going to be the SK debut or the trip up?
I don't know.
I hope it's the debut.
I don't know.
I hope so.
It's so late in the season as well that I wonder how much that weighs on them in terms of, you know, inspiring them to continue to start doing well. It's like it's already kind of too late sort of vibe, I feel like. So it is week 4. It's a little late to come alive, but you know, better late than never, I suppose.
And I think, you know, when you do finally find it, like, you know, my man Wolverine found it at the end of his like 40s in that movie where he was playing whatever his name Barnum was. You know, you can come alive at any time. It depends on what your motivation is. I think Renegades have been middle of the pack forever, so they want to maybe get out of there, find a win, secure just some value going into the next season and saying, all right, you know, we're ready to at least get W's, but maybe not the W's we want. And also SK to say that Dethroner, pay it. They're paying off. They are guys that we can actually work with and give us some hope heading into kind of LAN season. So both teams have a lot to win, not a lot to lose.
That's a good point. I mean, those new guys, those rookies, have, like, if anything, they're the ones that want to pop off, right? Because then it makes it seem like, well, at least we did our jobs when we came here. Because if not, going into next season's, it's a little scary.
Yeah.
Well, Thursday is actually looking like a relatively interesting day. The first matchup we have is Na'Vi versus Fnatic. And this is when you were saying to watch pretty much all of Fnatic's games from this point on. They have not been able to beat Fnatic. They actually were barely able to beat NIP the first time around. They weren't able to beat them the second time around.
2 losses,
Do you think this is going to be the typical 5-game set we get out of these two, or is it going to be something different?
I think this needs to be with Bomb King available again. that has to be the catalyst for Fnatic to come back and to beat themselves. They've been doing so much like wishy-washy, swippy-swappy with Tenor and Fishy and Bugsy. I think having one of Fisheko's main champions open, and with all the prioritization on the bans of Willow and Drogos, he just hasn't had a lot left in the tank to feel comfortable on. Eevee's not been played a lot, so
that's a good point.
This is the week that I think Fnatic needs to come alive with Bomb King.
Fishy has been, honestly, one of the biggest game makers with Eevee in the PPL, like since we've seen Eevee in the PPL. Yeah. So I think that is definitely hurting their Fnatic kind of champion swap up. But Creatives as well is such a good player, and he's such a silently good player. We talk about Mutsu a lot. He has a lot of those plays. You know, Bittner has those plays where you make him scream. Creatives just kind of does it. And that's why he was MVP last year, actually this year in the 2018 Hires Expo in January.
Yeah.
And has a chance to go back and win it again this year because Na'Vi are so good with him. The big thing about Fnatic Na'Vi that I do want to mention for everyone watching is the fact that Na'Vi are so good at studying opponents. That is why Fnatic have not been able to win at LAN. Fnatic are always winning. Na'Vi look at their strategy and they find a way to beat it when it comes down to it. Now Na'Vi are the ones ahead. I think this is the best situation for Fnatic to be in because they're not the ones who everyone's looking at. They're trying to beat Na'Vi, and Na'Vi have a very simple strategy of getting a Gnar all the time. I don't know if it's that, you know, bulletproof, despite how hard her skin is.
I like the idea that like their entire strategy is like, oh, well, we got the rock, so we're set. That's all we need. But admittedly, that's
tell me I'm
kind of
wrong.
all they've needed.
Tell me I'm wrong.
Once you get lazy,
how
you
many
put them on
lazy
the point,
games?
and then Creatives as well as Phoenix, like the rest of the team just plays whatever. Spunky is probably one of the best supports that you have out there, so it's relatively easy to just plug and play 4 out of 5 of that roster. Once you get lazy on something he's comfortable on, which we have seen the Barrack in the past as well, I think it makes things go very easily for them. But they also have another match of the week, one that I think is another don't miss, specifically because Bodies is coming back. And that is Envy versus G2. There's a lot that could be on the line here, because so far Envy are winning the record over G2 right now, but this could switch things up.
It's all on him, man. It's all on Bodies this week. He's the big thing to watch in North America. Envy has been kind of super solid, almost in the way that Na'Vi is, where it feels like Envy like to study that opponent and have a couple of things prepared. Like they said, we have some big boy drafts prepared for Splice, and they just come in and they curb stomp Splice. There's just nothing there. G2 feel like we just kind of do what we want to do sort of thing, and we just adapt on the fly. Sometimes I feel like when they start to lose doing that on the fly, sort of by the seat of the pants sort of thing, and then they start to try and return to like a normalcy, like what you might expect from any other team in the league, that's when I actually don't like to watch G2. That's when I feel like they've thrown in the towel. When they try to get back to just vanilla stuff, they lose what makes them special.
I definitely agree with that. You're right. I feel like they need to come at it with a they're one of the best teams at doing what I think Na'Vi do to Fnatic, which is figuring an opponent out and then having an answer for them and playing it well. Maybe it's off-kilter, maybe it's something you don't expect from left field, but G2 Esports are absolute masters and wizards at that, so go for what you're good at. And I think Envy now, honestly, they're just looking so solid. I mean, I've played against Rock and Bodies in casual queues. They both look very solid. Bodies still warming up a little bit, but I think the fact is that these guys look untouchable, and so I can't call this one. I think at this point you're going to have to just watch and wait and see how this game transpires.
I think part of the strength overall of Envy is the fact that they have essentially 5 players that can play whatever they really need to and do well with it. Tolkien specifically was one of the players I think we had looked at for a long time.
Although Mr. Hazen Rubu lost me a rank game. I'm not going to... so I'm going for G2. Against Bodies and Shady Shades. I was like, you guys got to win this one. And we lost.
Well, speaking of must-wins, at least
you didn't have anything to do with that, did you?
No. Listen, I did my job, okay? I went 7, 7, and 14, okay? And I killed Bodies multiple times.
Perfectly balanced.
Listen, I got Bodies to say, man, it sucks playing against Willow in the post-game lobby. So you know I annoyed him. That's a job well done for me.
I would say that's a nice reward. I've also gotten that in some of the playtests, but at the same time,
Shades carried so
maybe
hard,
that's something to do with Willow. Virtus Pro in IP. Two teams that right now are looking incredible compared to what they have in the last couple splits of this year. NIP specifically, one of the teams that is on the verge of becoming #2 in Europe, being able to take this. Virtus Pro has gotten stronger every single week.
This is the week. You're tied with Fnatic. Fnatic play Na'Vi. You guys play VP. You've got the favorite in your matchup. I think this is the week that NIP can truly do it. They just have to show up, stay calm, and they will be #2 at the end of week 4.
I mean, I really do have to talk about Cruncy as well. I mean, his ability to come in, and not just Bonker, who's been like, I mean, low-key having an MVP level season for this team continually, like ever since he was introduced as a sub, you know, in the first Hi-Rez Expo and played that Shaolin in Game 7 on Frog Isle and just astounded us all. But I mean, the fact that he's just so consistent, he's allowing Perdo and Sheepa to fit in effortlessly, and Koa, I mean, just filling that role, the dirty jobs, man, but he's doing them so well. And I think this team has finally hit their stride.
There's a lot coming out from both sides of this matchup that I think is going to be very impressive. I'm curious to see Virtus Pro if they can actually pick up to the point where they are a team that dominates, or if this is going to be NIP being able to roll them. Because, I mean, admittedly, a team that can roll Fnatic will usually tend to be a little bit better than Virtus Pro in terms of if things are actually like able to take that property. But for the most part, I think this is up in the air. It's a match that's been kind of up in the air in the past, but I'm curious, do you think NIP are going to be able to find this as a 3-0, or do you think it's going to be a little closer?
No, I can't call it. I mean,
I don't know about 3-0.
Yeah.
I don't know about 3-0, but you brought up maps earlier. Maps, that's going to be important if it ends up coming down to a tiebreak at the end of the season, because NIP were able to 3-0 Fnatic in that in that matchup last week. That's what's going to be big. So just keep an eye on that. I don't know if they'll 3-0 VP, because there is kind of a lot of magic and a lot of history between those two teams, and having those old names in the kill feed maybe starts to spark something back up here. I don't know, but it is going to be a good one, and I still think NIP can beat number 2 at the end of this week.
Well, we can take one more look at the schedule for this week coming up, so you can see when all of those games are happening. The only one I think we didn't actually touch on was Splyce versus SK, but admittedly, with Splyce look the way they did last week and SK look the way they have all split, I kind of expect Splyce to come out on top of that one. If they can look the way they did 2 weeks ago, then I think it's going to be a lot faster of a set.
Yeah, I mean, it's inconsequential if you're worried about LAN and upcoming things like that. You do want to see how these teams are progressing, but, you know, we're talking about qualifying top 2 spots. Still a lot of conversations there, so that's everybody's focus for this week.
Well, that's going to be it for week 4, at least for the overlook. We do have a meme video, which I have been told by Blake that Joe said that the ending of this video is the best he has ever done, or at least he feels
proud of
it is the best. So I am really curious to see. I've seen like the first 5 seconds.
Now you've set it up. Now they have high expectations.
So hopefully
should have said it was the worst.
Hold up. It was absolutely the worst video I've ever seen. Let's go ahead and watch it.
Take a closer look at that snout.
Ethan Bradbury.
Isoflorex.
He definitely...
That sounds like a line of a samurai. Isoflorex! Isoflorex!
Get your scouters ready. Welcome to WatchMojo.com, and today we'll be counting down our picks for the top 10 most powerful anime characters of all time. Number 1.
Isoflorex! Isoflorex!
What?
I'll give it to him. That was probably the best ending to one of these videos I've seen.
What?
How do you feel right now? We're sitting at a desk with the #1 caster in anime.
I mean,
the strongest character.
Tell me how.
Who knew it would be me all along?
Yeah, man. I mean, for a guy who doesn't like shonen, I didn't realize you'd star in one. Congratulations.
That's why I never show up to anime night and watch along with you guys.
He's making his own.
Yeah.
Nick,
I don't want to give it away. But I've been studying my opponents to become the strongest anime guy
in the world.
In the world?
Tragic death.
That was a good one. But
great anime.
We also have some really good plays coming out from last week and a couple weeks ago from the PPL. And a lot of these were interesting. One of them, I think, made for, I think, the best day we've had watching the PGS in a long time, where it was just fun. And I think that's the one that's up first, where we got to see a Makoa come through and just roll through people, almost literally.
Wait, was this 720? Oh, it
this
was.
is the 720.
720. Look at this. So he hits that spray, dude. Little one spin, little spray, little two spin, then the turnaround. And he thinks he's safe. But Cassie hits that spray. He said, boy, come here.
Come on now.
Come here, brother.
Oh, and then another spray. That was nice. That was clean.
Nice. Loved it.
Clean.
That you had the time of your life when you saw that, because originally we were like, okay, it was a 360 ult hook double kill, whatever. Then when we did a slow-mo replay of it, we realized he spins, sprays, spins, then goes in. That's his fight.
It's the little Terry.
The 720.
Ooh, kill him.
Get him.
But the next one we had, this one's actually a relatively good goodbye overall. Flame was able to get a good set of plays overall through his last week and through all of his duration through PPL. But this one is just a clean triple kill.
Yeah, he played a really nice Androxus. Get that punch. Essentially a quadra there.
Yeah.
Evil Eye.
Coming in with the steal.
Cuss stealing it. Classic.
How dare they?
Classic.
But our number one top play of the week, I guess, for this week was actually Rock Monkey being able to play Leon, so something that we have seen in the past be successful. And it's on Splitstone Quarry, another thing we've seen be successful for Envy.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, man. The good team's 3-0. Part of the reason is one person on their team does something like that.
I think
I expected a little bit more. I looked up and I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, that's it?
Yeah,
but
well, he got 4.
I mean, that was...
Listen, pushing on a map like Splitstone doesn't happen unless someone jumps in and does that.
Point.
You can't, like, poke each other from, like, half court and then just say, like, okay, where's my quadra kill coming? I like it.
And that was a really quick set overall from Envy. I mean, that one, we were sitting in there for about one game of a Splice Renegade set, so we were relatively comfortable overall. But we also have a top fail for this week, and it's actually, I want to say, kind of like a compilation, and it's that Frog Isle takes its toll on lives.
Oh, yeah. This was so weird.
Oh,
Everyone just slipping and falling off the map today. In this game in particular, Poison fell off. The guys in OCE were falling off, and we were just like, man.
So I tried. It's the weird thing is they're oh man,
Frog Isle,
trying to get
deadliest
vision.
map
3
in the
different
realm.
people that day, dude. 3 people.
Yeah, gotta be careful. Slippery.
The deadliest map in the realm. Also, the only map in the realm that has a real world location.
There you go.
He's sticking to it.
I don't know. One day it'll be true.
Okay,
Potentially.
I'm ready. I'm ready to go there.
But we're also going to talk about the meta. And the meta for this week, I think, is going to shift up a little bit. And it's because one champion who we haven't gotten to see pretty much at all during the PPL is going to be coming back. And it is Bomb King. Right now, no one's played it as far as, we know for this week. Buy or sell Bomb King.
Take all my credit cards. Purchase Bomb King. Hey, get that back.
I mean, he told me to take
Purchase. You can take my movie pass card because apparently this has no value anymore. I think Bomb King is going to be the biggest conversation piece. Truly, he's the most top tier, consistently banned selected champion that's going to be available this week. And he's such a staple for players like Fisheko, for players even like Shadow to be able to use. We're going to see a ton of adjustments around this guy being available. Because it's not just Will and Drogos anymore.
And he's almost a Nara-esque, where he's not really banned that much. And only against like those super top tier players, only against like a Na'Vi will you see a Nara even really looked at to be banned out. But in terms of blaster bans, it's been mostly Drogos.
Yeah.
Do you think because we haven't had him available, Drogo's Willow have been banned a lot more, as a couple, I would guess? So do you think we're going to start seeing a shift away from that because he's available?
Yeah, because you can't ban them all out.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to see. We're going to see a totally different landscape, I think, because if you choose to take one, well, you're still getting another. So what did that ban do? It's just really changed the course of it, not opened anything up or closed anything off. And so teams are going to have to say, well, do we want to ban them all? Should we just leave them all open because we'll get our pick of the litter and then ban front lines? I mean, this could change the way that they go about it. It's just going to be up to the tactics of the team.
And Bomb King tends to do pretty well. I mean, most of the blasters, do pretty well against front lines. So we've been seeing 4 front line bans. This has not been an uncommon thing in Season 2. So it'll be a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah.
The other champions we have on this list, one of them I kind of championed for, and that is actually Shaolin, who is the next one on the list, because I feel like when we came into Worlds,
Yeah.
he was a really big topic of
Oh, yeah.
conversation. Going into the first split, because of how well he did at Worlds, and going into the summer split, because of how well we've seen him perform overall, it's always been where's Shaolin going to be? And then he's just not been around. I think we've seen him 1 game, maybe 2 games in the PPL, a couple games here or there. We got to see him last week in the PGS, but he's not being picked up anywhere near as often.
So
Is
buy or
he going
sell?
to be worth it, or do you just not want him?
I don't remember if I have any to sell or not.
I don't know if you
My
do.
stock.
You have your stock is relatively low.
What was the last move I made with Shaolin? I don't know. Lazy was saying he thinks Shaolin, and this was a couple weeks ago, he was like, I think Shaolin's about to come back in. He thinks like the strength of it is people remembering how to play against it.
Right.
On like certain maps, like where to stand and where not to stand to get stunned, but we just haven't seen it. So I don't know. I don't know when's that week he's just gonna come out of nowhere with no changes made to him. Ruckus does it sometimes, but I don't know. Shaolin is he's in that limbo right now.
I mean, the question is, are you going to be able to take a Shaolin instead of a Cassie or a Leon? I mean, those are the real questions, because Shaolin is fitting not in these triple DPS compositions we were seeing, but as one of your 2 damage dealers. So you're going to take a Bomb King, or you're going to take a Drogoz. Is the Shaolin the next one that you take? That's the question that I think people are going to have to get comfortable answering, and right now I don't know if that's going to be the case.
I know a lot of it is the shift from the fact that he can't really flank as easily anymore, but speaking of flanks, Talus is also someone that we're looking at for this week. He's been all right. Like, I wouldn't say he's doing stellar. I wouldn't say he's doing bad. Do you think he's worth buying, or is that something that you just want to get out of here?
Take my wallet. I think he's going to get bought. You can take it all. I'm definitely investing in Talus this week. I think he was already a good pick, and I think people were grabbing him up 5th. He did fit that kind of interesting lineup, but then he got the buff. I mean, I think the buff coming in 1.6 is going to be the game changer, which makes people say we should prioritize Talus, albeit maybe not more than a Leon or a Blaster, but I think he's going to get valued.
I think the coolest thing about Bomb King coming back in is that because it's going to be picked or banned basically every game, it has a massive impact on the rest of the draft, right? Maybe that's Torvald making it through now more often, which means Talus makes it through more often now. And that's what's so cool about the draft, is just the waterfall effect that one champion can have.
Yep.
I think the guys that have been playing Talus will probably play him more. I don't know if that's going to... if he's going to become strong enough for new players to want to learn him, if that makes sense.
Right.
Well, we have one more champion that is on the list, and admittedly, I don't know whether or not you can actually afford this one, but it's Furia. She gets picked up all the time. She has, I think, a good win rate overall and a ton of healing. Do you buy her even though she's going to be expensive, or do you sell her because she might start falling off?
Well, you had this interesting thing. You weren't sure if like the nerf that happened was going to impact the way people are actually playing her, which is the Solar Blessing. I mean, that didn't really get nerfed. The Kindle Soul did, and that's her right click. And I think that is a big feels kind of change. I think for just players used to having it a second later or a second earlier, getting it on Chronos 2, now they have to wait till Chronos 3 before it hits that point. And remember, her heals affect her passive. They affect a lot of different things that give her the impact she's been having, which is the damage to do stuff like that. Look at that passive. It's full. She's 33%. If you're healing a little bit less, it may not be as full. So I think that this will unfortunately be Furia falling down in priority. I don't know how much, though.
So her fall-off damage got changed too much. Most of the clips that we're seeing here, right, she's still going to be really effective when people try and test or try and step to her, try and get in her face. I think she's going to be just fine here. I'm holding. Yeah.
Would you say that because of the, I want to say like some of the shifts she's having, do you think Maldamba will start taking a little bit more priority over her, or is it still just this tug of war where you've essentially just replaced Genos from old with Furia?
No one's mad to get Maldamba, I think, at all right now. I think he's Mending Spirits is such a Mending Spirits with Swift Spirits is such a dangerous combination. It is a game changer when you're playing something like an
Gourd buff, dude.
Yeah, and it got 20 HPS. Oh, but seriously, like those are little things that make someone be like, "Yeah, Maldamba's just OP right now."
You know, every frontline should be like, you have to play Maldamba now. Like, I just want you to know, like, if I'm playing Inara, you got to play Maldamba, and like you're going to only heal me.
I'm telling you, man, Swift Spirits is just a game changer right there.
Swift Spirits, actually, that's a good card to talk about, but I guess we can get into that at some other point.
Yeah.
The only other thing on the list for today is the PGS, and this is going to be the last week of the PGS for this split coming up, and a lot of these teams have been doing well, but I feel like so far we've had a much more competitive region in every single region overall than what we have had in the past.
Yeah, you had a lot of you know, especially in Latin America and Brazil, you had a lot of big roster changes for the top teams, so that helps the guys at the bottom sort of catch up a little bit. But there has been more upsets big upsets as well. Kanga almost lost a set. We had the free agent boys, which were formerly Nocturnes.
Yep.
Those guys lost a set as well. You had SSG losing a set. I mean, it's crazy the amount of upsets that we have seen. I think SSG, when and if they get the FRZ guy back, if he's able to actually make land, that's a big conversation as well.
And looking at, coming to land, being able to play through like placements up against teams like in the PPL, like we've seen in the past, do you think there's going to be a team that can make the run that we saw out of Nocturnes earlier this year? Or have they all kind of tripped up either through changes or just the way the meta has shifted that none of these international teams might be able to hold a candle to the PPL anymore?
Has to be SSG.
I think SSG is definitely the, especially if they get FRZ got back, will that be a conversation? Here's two things I don't know. If they qualify for LAN, Free Agent Boys and SSG, right? Does Hecate and FRZ God come back?
Yeah.
Do they say it's worth it just for the one trip, and they figure out that, because I don't see their reasons for not leaving affecting them going for a week at HRX or 2 weeks at HRX. So I think if those players are there, they're dangerous, they're respected, you have to pay attention to them.
And just to give you guys context at home of why we're having this conversation about these two, so Hecate's work, FRZ God is school.
Right.
And his focus on school for FRZ God, his parents, last time he was here, was basically like he had to perform or stay home, from what we were told. Like he had to make a big placement. He had to have a really good performance to show his parents that this is going to be worth continuing to pursue. For Hecate, he just got a new job, and so that's why he had to kind of take a step back, retire, because he wasn't able to just put in the time. But if they're still, like we saw last week, they actually
had Hecate and they had Jane.
So if they're still at this point confident enough to bring him in, he just takes, the thing is for HRX, it's going to be a long month of coming to play, coming from international scene. So I don't know if we'll get that much time off work. That's a whole different conversation that only they can answer.
Well, I think this week is going to determine a lot of these top seeds. It's actually one of the, I want to say, rare instances where normally right now you would have the #1 kind of settled.
Yeah.
But for a lot of these regions, you're going to have #1 and 2 going up against each other. And like you said, Friday, Free Agent Boys versus Zaga. I think actually who wins that, it would make it a tie. So they would go towards, I think, map differential or whatever the next step is. So if Hecate's playing, great for Free Agent Boys. If he's not,
I almost guarantee he's playing in that game.
I feel like I agree.
I guarantee he's playing, and I mean, we might see freaking Fuzzy Logic back in that game. At this point, they're like, I think they would do it for their boys just to be like, yo, we want to send you guys.
You just pick up into the lines just dead for a second. Hey, man.
Listen, it's been a while.
I need one more favor.
It's been a while, but I need...
Well, that's going to be it, I think, this week for the PGS and the PCL and the PPL. It's going to be incredibly interesting, a lot of tight games. We can go ahead and look at the broadcast schedule so you know exactly when to catch every single one of those. Esports Weekly is the first thing on Monday. That's what you're watching right now.
That's right.
Right after this, we're going to have the Console League coming through, Xbox, PS4. Tomorrow through Friday, we will have the PGS into the PPL at 11 a.m. and 3 p.m. respectively. So make sure you tune in. I think live.skillshot.com works for every single one of those, so you never have to worry about what link you want to go to watch Paladins.
And if you are a full day Paladins watcher, enjoy this week. So last week we have the PCL, the PGS, and the PPL for the rest of the year. So make sure to enjoy it. Definitely start up and live.skillshot.com, mixer.com/Paladins game. Check it all out. It's going to be a really fun week.
And Mixer this week.
All Mixer.
PPL.
All Mixer.
It's going to be a big change up. I'm wondering how that's going to go through. I think we got a couple of emotes earlier.
Show up tomorrow at 3 p.m. Definitely
really
anyone
fun.
who's watching,
Yes.
show up tomorrow. Support the broadcast adjustment. I think it'll be really fun to see a bunch of people engaging, chatting, and getting really excited for the PPL.
And speaking of Mixer, that's where we're about to go just for the Console League. So
We're already there.
We're going to go ahead and kick it to, I guess, the end of the show here. But we'll be back in just a few minutes for the pre-show for Console, and then following it up with 8 sets of the Console games as well as the post-show. So make sure you stay tuned in for that. But until then, have a good rest of your Monday.